The Panthers made a quarterback change, and the Raiders are coming off a big win on the road. It's week 3. It's Panthers-Raiders, and it's Locked On NFL crossover Thursday here on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Raiders.
You are Locked On NFL crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers and Locked On Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Be sure to subscribe or follow each of our shows for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. I am Julian, the host of Locked On Panthers. He is Q Myers, the host of Locked On Raiders. It is crossover Thursday here on Locked On NFL. It's presented by our friends over at PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Panthers have made a quarterback change. Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle, is now under center in Carolina, and the Raiders are coming off a big win on the road against the Ravens. I'm excited for this one, Q. How you doing, man?
Man, fantastic. Can't wait to see what this one looks like. It's the Raiders season home opener at Allegiant Stadium, welcoming in the Carolina Panthers. And clearly with the team, the Panthers, there's a lot of change that's happened since week 2, since their lost week 2. So I'm sure that's been very busy in your world.
Yes, very busy. And thinking about the biggest story about the Panthers, the away team in this matchup, it clearly is the Panthers' decision on Monday to bench Bryce Young, their first overall pick from just a year ago, making 18 starts. They've said right now, for the time being, they're done with Bryce. And that certainly surprised me, Q. I don't know what you thought from an outsider's perspective, but after Dave Canales came out and said that Bryce Young, not once but twice, was our quarterback after the game on Sunday, I was surprised to find out the next day that he decided, after watching the film, that he had seen enough of the Panthers after only 2 weeks, after buying Frank Reich 11 games in the last season, getting rid of general manager Scott Fitter, hiring Dan Morgan from down the hallway to be the GM, getting Canales, who did a great job with Baker Mayfield and also Geno Smith the last 2 years in Tampa and Seattle, respectively. The moves on the offensive line, out wide at receiver. I was just surprised that after 2 games, and this is an organization that put Bryce Young in a position to fail last year, and it's likely their fault that he even looked as discombobulated the first 2 weeks as he did. I'm just surprised that their own failure by putting him in a bad situation last year, that 2 weeks into the reclamation project, they've said, nah, we're good. He's not our guy. Bring in Andy Dalton. What did you think about that from this outsider perspective? I know you're on ESPN radio nationally, so y'all been talking about this. What are your thoughts on what's going on here in Carolina?
For everything that you just said is why I was surprised as well. I was a big Bryce Young fan coming out of Alabama. I thought he was a hell of a quarterback, and I don't care what anyone says now. 99% of people knew that he was the number 1 overall pick. I know it's easy to say, oh, C.J. Stroud was the guy now because he was successful, but Bryce Young was the dude. There was no doubt about it. And because Dave Canales had the, experience and the good fortunes of being able to help coach up, Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith, I thought, okay, he's going to be the guy put in place to help Bryce Young really come along. And so after 2 games, I was shocked. They went out and got an offensive line. They went out and spent money on the offensive line. So I thought, okay, it's going to come together. They've gotten weapons. It's going to come together. And then after 2 games, just to go ahead and say no, I thought, wow, either Bryce Young is really, really bad or that locker room was really going to go south quick, and he wanted to make sure that that didn't happen. So very shocked, and I'll tell you what, I'm not going to lie. I got my eye on what happens the future of Bryce Young, because depending on what happens in Carolina, if it becomes a Trey Lance situation where they decide to move on from him and they move on from him at a price that's cheap, I wouldn't have no problem if the Raiders reached out and got him to see what he's got left. I would have no problem with that. He's a young dude, as you know.
Yeah, and speaking of guys like Trey Lance, and you look at Zach Wilson as well, those guys went for day 3 picks, and they're currently QB3 at their current spots. And hopefully for Bryce, he can get another opportunity in Carolina. I personally think you don't make this move unless you're completely done with him. David Tepper, the owner, who has been very hands-on here in Carolina, he had to have had some say when it comes to this decision, as he's said in the past. And every major decision made in Carolina, they have to pass it through with him. And he's the one who wanted Bryce Young. And I love that you brought up all the revisionist history people are trying to bring up now, being like, oh, the NFL didn't look at Bryce Young as the consensus number 1 quarterback. Yes, they did. Some teams preferred Stroud or Richardson over Young, but the Texans themselves thought about moving up to number 1 to get Bryce. I don't want to hear any of that nonsense that we're hearing right now. It's unfortunate for him. We'll see if he gets another opportunity. But for now, it's the Andy Dalton show. And this offense was not functional. So they were going to have to make this move eventually if Bryce continued to look like he did against the Saints and also against the Chargers last 2 weeks. But I'm just surprised after all they did to help out Bryce Young, they said, nah, we're done with Bryce Young. So that's what's going on offensively here in Carolina. Defensively,
what changes though? What changes now with Andy Dalton? What changes? Does it feel like it's a little bit more crisp offensively?
It has to be. I looked at him the last 2 weeks, man, and like I was there at training camp, and that's what's probably the most surprising to me is just how bad he looked in the games during training camp. While like camp, I don't take too much out of it. I'm honestly like looking at where guys are on like the depth chart and just kind of formation. Like I'm not super concerned about, how good the offense or defense look against each other. Like I didn't think the Panthers defense can be any good anyway. So if the Panthers went out there offensively and ripped them apart, that would mean nothing to me. As we've seen so far, the defense has been a disaster, but he didn't look like this. I was out there for the joint practice with the Jets. He looked really good. Looked a lot better than Aaron Rodgers did on the other side of the field for New York in that offense. So I don't know. He was not comfortable in the pocket. And the Panthers, looking at Pro Football Focus, are 5th in their pass blocking stat. So the offensively, as far as pass blocking, that's not been an issue. They were able to run the ball last week, even though they haven't been as dedicated as I think they should have been, at least last week in that loss against the Chargers. So I suppose they should have a quarterback in Andy Dalton who trusts the pocket more, who's able to be accurate, on time, deliver the football. That's what changes. And maybe we see some shot plays. That was a big conversation on Wednesday. Whether we would see them trying to throw the ball more downfield, did not do that week 1, really didn't do it last week. There was a lot of checkdowns. I'm wondering, was that the design or was that the quarterback? So possibly that's what changes. Dalton had a step in last year on the road against Seattle, threw for 350 yards, and that was the highest total passing yards Panthers had last year. Maybe that's what happens on Sunday. I don't know. But I think the offense should be more functional. I'm not expecting it to all of a sudden become some juggernaut because they put Andy Dalton in there. So we'll see. But I am still concerned. I'll say that.
I understand. Hey, look, I mean, Andy Dalton, if there's something to hold on to, I mean, he is 4-0 against the Raiders, so there's always that. So I'm sure that's
someone asked him about that on Wednesday, and he's like, yeah, it's a lot of different coaching staff, different players. He didn't want to make too much of it, but I'll take it. Like Derek Carr, who used to be the Raiders quarterback, he's also undefeated against the Panthers, and he's seen different Panther teams. So maybe there's something to that. But defensively, it's also a train wreck here in Carolina. I did not expect this defense that lost Brian Burns, lost Frankie Louvu, traded away Dante Jackson, watched Jeremy, who they didn't use in the scheme last year with Jero Rivera coming over from Denver. I did not expect this to be a top-ranked defense. I expected to struggle. I thought they're going to be better against the run, though, and they have been an absolute disaster, giving up on average 200 yards per game so far. The Chargers with Jim Harbaugh, they want to run the football. That was no surprise. The Saints, obviously they can do it. No one thought the Saints offensively were going to be the juggernaut they've turned out to be these first 2 weeks. Going to Dallas, put it on them, doing it to Carolina in week 1. The defense has been a disaster. Derek Brown, he's out for the season, and they are really struggling on the defensive line where Shai Tuttle, who's just been a terrible signing, or was he still in Carolina is because the contract that Scott Bitter and Samir Suleiman, who handled the cap for them, they couldn't really get out of it as far as the dead cap money and what they would have lost salary cap wise. He's injured. That does not put them in a great situation. So I'm curious because the Raiders have not run the ball at all so far this season. And if they can run in Carolina, then they already have real problems, but they're going to have even more problems defensively if they can't stop Las Vegas from running the football on Sunday.
Well, I'll tell you, the Raiders are going to definitely want to run the ball, right? That's something that I know Antonio Pierce is, been talking about quite a bit. We've talked about him or talked to him all week long, and he's saying that it's got to be better, that the Raiders' running game has been terrible. But maybe this is the game where they see a struggling Panther defense to stop the run. Maybe this is one where you see a little bit more dedication to trying to run the ball and maybe have a little bit more success. But you know how it is, man. It takes the offensive line, the running get backs. It takes them to all be working in unison to be able to have success. And so far through 2 weeks, the Raiders haven't had that. So we'll see what happens. But, I'm sure that the Raiders know and seeing it on tape that the Panthers have struggled to stop the run, and they're probably going to have a more of an emphasis on it than they've had the first 2 weeks.
No, absolutely. And J.C. Horn, the Panthers corner, said last week in the locker room after the game, if you can't stop the run in the NFL, you can't stop anything. And that's been the case for them first 2 weeks. And I got to imagine Antonio Pierce, a defensive guy, you know how defensive coaches are. They want to run the ball. They want to help out their defense. They're going to be real reductive when it comes off into schemes nowadays. It's got to be killing him that they have not run the football. So they're probably salivating. The Carolina Panthers are coming to town on Sunday. I'm Julian Council, host of Locked On Panthers. He's Q Myers, host of Locked On Raiders. Talking Panthers, talking Raiders on this Locked On NFL crossover Thursday. When we come back, let's take a focus on the home team coming off a big win against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. We'll do that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Raiders. For most of us who like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on a Patrick Mahomes rookie card just isn't in the cards. I love collecting, but that's some serious money to drop. Thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gym mints for a fraction of their retail price. Every card that I listed was hit from last week's Arena Club slab pack drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of possible cards, and clear hit rates for each one. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. After your pools are revealed, they'll immediately be placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, or auction. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent, with a full grade rationale provided and explanation of how cards were scored. Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is a card collecting platform you have to check out. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL. That's arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL, code LockedOnNFL for 10% off your first purchase. Back here on this Locked On NFL crossover Thursday, Locked On Panthers, Locked On Raiders. I'm Julian Council. He is Q Myers. We're talking about the Panthers at the Raiders on Sunday afternoon, 4:05 Eastern, I believe, and 1:05 local time there in Las Vegas. All right, Q. So we talk about the Panthers, the disaster they are so far through 2 seasons. It's 2 weeks of the season. And God, I mean, last 2 seasons also been a disaster. 2 weeks, 2 weeks in, and we've already seen an Adam Thielen meltdown. We've already seen a quarterback change Derek Brown out for the rest of the season. The vibes are off, but the vibes, they feel pretty good over in Las Vegas. And we talk about the inability to run the football, but Gardner Minshew was out there slinging it offensively last week on the road against the Ravens. How are you feeling about this offense heading into this week 3 matchup?
Well, it's funny that, Minshew was slinging it, but he was really slinging it in the fourth quarter, right? I mean, if you look back at this Raiders through 2 games, they've played 8 quarters, and really 6 of them have been pretty bad as far as offense goes, right? The offense has not really stepped up to the challenge through 6 quarters, and they played 2 really good quarters and 1 phenomenal quarter in the fourth quarter against Baltimore. But the Raiders are still trying to find themselves offensively, and they found a little something in the fourth quarter against the Ravens where Devontae's getting open. He caught the ball 9 times, got a touchdown pass. Rookie Brock Bowers had another 9 catches on top of the 6 he had week 1. I mean, so he's as advertised. Devontae's as advertised, as we all know that. But just getting the Raiders on track offensively has been a struggle, and it's been a struggle to watch, to be 100% honest. I mean, it's a work in progress as new offensive coordinator Luke Getsy is trying to install this West Coast offense, and Gardner Minshew, he's the leader of the team right now as a starting quarterback. And I'll say this, man, even going back to last week against Baltimore, it was 9-6 at halftime, and I was thinking, maybe they got to make a call to Aiden O'Connell and put him in. Maybe maybe Minshew's not going to get it done. And then, of course, he comes back and has a good second half and a really good fourth quarter, and it shut me up, which is fine. I'm good with that. But there's still so many questions. And, as I've talked with Raider Nation and, been listening to what they say and they reading texts that they have. And, there's still so many concerns about this offense. Can the run game get going? I mean, at some point, the run game has to go. You can't, you're going to run the ball 27 yards in a game and think you're going to win consistently. That's not going to happen. It worked last week, which was a hell of a win, but it's not going to happen consistently. So they've got to find a way to get Zamir White going, Alexander Madison going. I mean, somehow, some way, they've got to find a way to do it. And I know that's something that AP has been talking about all week. He called their running game and their effort piss poor last week. Those are his words, not mine. Right. So when the head coach is saying that that's what the run game looks like, and he's putting the pointing the finger at the offensive line, they're not doing their job. I will say this, though. Jackson Powers Johnson, their second-round pick out of Oregon, hasn't played yet. He hasn't done anything. He was, on the PUP list during training camp and never got any action in the preseason. He has been ramping up to make his NFL debut. It sounds like he's going to make his debut on Sunday. So he most likely will be in that left guard position, taking over for Cody Whitehair or Andrews Pete, who both actually saw action last week against Baltimore because neither one of the guys were holding it down like they should. So now you have Colton Miller. You'll probably have JPJ there as a starter, Andre James at the center spot, Dylan Parham back at the right guard spot, and then Thayer Munford at the right tackle. Now, they haven't played together, so they're going to take some time to gel, but that's the best version of this Raiders offensive line that you're going to get. So they look like they're going to have all the guys that they want to have out there. How quickly they can come together is going to be the biggest question. But I'll tell you, man, this Raiders offense is a big mystery. It's a big question mark. You just don't know who's going to show up week in and week out. And so far, it hasn't really been good through 2 games.
Sounds like we could have a rock fight on Sunday. I know that first half, week one, against the Chargers kind of was one until LA took over, started to run the ball down the Raiders' throat. I think J.K. Dobbins, 131 yards rushing in that second half. I'm interested because obviously offensive line, like that's a big piece to being able to run the football, but also like yards after contact. Like the back's got to break tackles and do something every once in a while. And Zamir White, kid who's actually from North Carolina, played at the University of Georgia, and Alexander Madison was number 2 there for a while behind Dalvin Cook with the Vikings. I'm just curious, like, is there any regret possibly? And I get new regime here in Las Vegas. Any regret through the first 2 weeks of not still having Josh Jacobs as the lead back there in Las Vegas?
I mean, for me, yeah. For me, I was disappointed to see Josh Jacobs go. I was a big fan of what he was able to do for this team, the leadership, the everything that, whenever they didn't have an identity, he was able to provide that identity. But once new GM Tom Telesco came in and told us at the combine that it's not a one back league anymore, I kind of knew that, okay, they're not going to pay the money to Josh Jacobs to be, to stay there long term. So, I think that he provided a lot. They're trying to implement this new blocking scheme and running scheme. They're trying to have the outside zone running scheme as opposed to the power running scheme. And Zamir White, I believe, is a lot better fit for the power run scheme when he just can get the ball and go, as opposed to having to be patient, find the cutback lane and then boom, stick your foot in the dirt and go. That's where Alexander Madison is a lot better. He's been in that kind of scheme his whole career, whether that was in Minnesota or wherever. So I think that it actually fits him better. But they like Zamir White a lot, right? And so they want him to be the lead back. I like Zamir White a lot as well. I think he's a hell of a player. I think he's a hell of a dude, right? He's an easy guy to root for. He's just, a humble, Southern cat, right? That just likes to go and do what he does, right? And so he's easy to root for, but he's got to be better. And the offensive line's got to be better. He's bulked up. He's strong. He's fast. But he's got to be able to, like you said, man, break some tackles, and the offensive line's got to help him out. So it's still a work in progress. And that's why, like, all week long, Raider Nation's been talking about getting the run game going, Maybe you got to pass early to open up the run as opposed to run to open up the pass, but they got to find a way to be somewhat balanced, and they're not that right now.
Yeah, no, Zamir White, good old country boy from Scotland County, Highway 74 in North Carolina, and Zeus, that's what they used to call him. I don't know if they still call him Zeus. He's got to start running like that if he's going to be called Zeus in the NFL now. So offensively, some questions there about the offensive line. Looks like JPJ might have his first career start in the NFL, trying to figure out what those backs can do. And, of course, it looks like Gardner Minshew, at least for now, he's got a hold of the reins at that quarterback spot. Defensively, I mean, Maxx Crosby, dog, went out there last week, was a dog again. And Panthers talk about they need to get some dogs. They need to get a guy like Maxx Crosby since they let Brian Burns go. What's that defense looking like through 2 weeks so far this season?
Phenomenal. It really is. I mean, that's where the Raiders are going to hang their hat. That's where Antonio Pierce wants to hang his hat. That's what gives me all the confidence in the world in the Raiders, is the fact that they have that defense led by Patrick Graham for now the third year in a row. Antonio Pierce knows how to push every button and get everything he needs to. Maxx Crosby, he's the guy that everyone talks about. Christian Wilkins, they picked up in the offseason from Miami in free agency. That was a big-time pickup. Robert Spillane's not necessarily a household name at the linebacker position. He's playing some really good ball. Jack Jones, their corner, he's a guy that he looks to create turnovers all the time. Jacorian Bennett, second-year guy out of Maryland, he's playing well. Nate Hobbs in the slot. Like the defense we can talk all day about, right? The defense, I think, is going to be one of the best defenses in the league. I really feel very confident in them. And it's funny, even week one against the Chargers, I know that it looks bad now after you go back and look. It's all right, 22-10. J.K. Dobbins went off, but man, it's just the Raiders offense couldn't do anything. They had them out there on the field so long that the dam eventually broke. But man, they kept the Raiders in that game just like they did against Baltimore. Literally, it was 9-6 at halftime against Baltimore, and the Raiders only had 43 yards of offense. You know what I mean? Like, that's not supposed to be possible.
Oh, my God.
Right, exactly. But the defense.
I mean, that's what the Panthers been doing these 2 weeks, too. So this really might be a rock fight. Oh, no. Oh, no. I can't.
When keeping it real goes wrong, right?
Oh, no.
Just saying. So, I mean, that's what it is, man. But the defense, I have so much confidence in. And the other thing with the defense and really the team in general, normally when the Raiders in the past have had a big win like they did against Baltimore, then all of a sudden they have a team that's not as good and playing down, or maybe they're coming in wounded. The Raiders always play down to that competition and usually find a way to take a L. There's so many examples of that. I just don't feel like that's this team. I don't feel like that this Raiders team is going to do that. I feel like Antonio Pierce is really not worried about who the opponent is, whether it's the Ravens, the Panthers, the Chiefs. It's all about the Raiders. Like, you have to go out there and play to a certain standard. That's really what he's been preaching. And that's why I have confidence that this team is going to find a way to get it done on Sunday. They play their ball and not worry about the opponent. But I mean, the defense, again, if there's one area to feel confident about, it's what the defense is going to bring to the table.
Yeah, and that could be bad news for Carolina, where I think the offense should be functional, which low bar. Ask people before the season, like, what's your expectations? They just wanted competence.
Yeah.
Did not get that week 1 or week 2. So possibly a competent offense. I don't know. That may not be good enough against the Raiders defense. It sounds like possibly one of the better ones in the league was able to hold down Lamar and the Ravens last week and that road win. All right. Locked on Panthers, Locked on Raiders. Julian Council, host of Locked on Panthers. Q Myers, host of Locked on Raiders. The Locked on NFL crossover Thursday. Going to take another quick pause. When we come back, going to talk about the 3 teams each team must do to win. Panthers, maybe just be competent. Raiders, I don't know, just keep doing what you're doing because you won on the road, beat Lamar, so I think you might be all right. We'll come back here in just a moment here on Locked on Panthers and Locked on Raiders. You heard me talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you now through September 22nd, and the clock is ticking. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV-based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime, y'all. YouTube TV is the best. Been having it for a couple of years. If you had DirecTV, you used to have Sunday Ticket. You used to also have a lot of sports on TV that have now come back, but still make the switch, go to YouTube TV and go ahead and bet on FanDuel. All you got to do is just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on Locked on Panthers and Locked on Raiders. It's a Locked on NFL crossover Thursday presented by our friends over at PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. The Raiders 1-1 to start off the season. The Panthers 0-2. They have a common opponent. The Chargers, week 1, were able to run on the Raiders in the second half, but it was a close game there in that divisional matchup. At halftime, the Panthers, well, they weren't really in the game at any point once they kicked it off. They had an opening kickoff face mask penalty, and Felipe Franks on the Panthers was like dancing on a clear face mask. So I knew right then and there this team was cooked. So we'll see if they're still cooked now that Andy Dalton is going to be the starting quarterback, but they got to do some things, Q. A lot of things, not just 3 things, but a lot of things. They're going to turn things around moving forward, but starting out on Sunday on the road against the Raiders. And I guess, God, trying to find 3 things to pin down. Convert on 3rd down. They are 2 for 22 through 2 weeks. It's embarrassing. And it's not like all these have been like 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. They've been in some 3rd and long situations. But I look back at last week, had a couple of 3rd and 2s and could not converted 1 out of those 4, which is just embarrassing that they were even in that situation. Another thing I think you got to really be able to do, just try to stretch the field vertically. If teams understand that you want to run the football, which Dave Canales stopped, but he wanted to be stubborn about running the ball. So far, the 2 backs, Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard, have carried the ball 28 times. That does not sound to me as if they're being stubborn at running the football. But if you want to be able to run the football, but you also want to be able to stretch the field, try and get the defense to come up a little bit more. Get some play action going on. Get down the field. Use a guy like Xavier Legette, who did not get a single target last week, your first-round pick out of South Carolina. Deontay Johnson, maybe try to find him down the field. Even Adam Thielen was wide open down the field last week in that game against the Chargers, and Bryce Young completely missed him. Got to be able to do that this week if they want to find a way to make some defenses honest, especially defense like Las Vegas. That is pretty stout up front. You can't be trying to just run the ball on them all day. Got to be able to throw the ball vertically. And then defensively, I mean, guys, this is one of the worst run teams in the NFL through 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. You can't be their get-right game. So, for the love of God, show some pride, toughen up, stop somebody. Derek Brown, he's not coming back. Shy Tuttle, even if he's out there, he's a liability. You need guys like Jaden Peavy to step up. LeBron Ray's got to step up. Some young guys, Nick Thurman as well. A'Shawn Robinson's been fine so far this season, but he's also been a part of 2 like really bad rushing defensive performances so far this season. So, got to find a way to stop the run. If you can't stop the run, like J.C. Hornstead, you can't stop anything in this league.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt about it. And, the Raiders definitely don't want the Panthers to be able to use the Raiders as their get-right game either. Right? I mean,
No.
the funny thing is, like, people are talking about the Raiders now because they beat Baltimore because nobody expected them to beat Baltimore. And so now one of the conversations is like, okay, well, now you don't want to be the team that most people don't believe the Panthers are going to win. And then all of a sudden they go in and be that. AP said it on Wednesday. He said, we don't want to be on the wrong end of that conversation this upcoming week, right? We want to make sure that we're focused. And, he said, how do we play after having success? How do we come back after having success? Do you, like I mentioned earlier, do you play at your level of your expectations, or do you play down to your competition? Do you ride a roller coaster? And he said, we don't want anything to do with the roller coaster. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting, especially offensively. I'm interested to see how the Panthers attack the Raiders, and especially with Andy Dalton, who's a wily veteran, and he's not obviously going to be able to see the field better than Bryce Young, and, just understand what he's seen and be able to, just to execute it a lot quicker. The processing should be quicker with Andy Dalton, a long-time vet. When you look at the Raiders, man, and I mean, just one of the things that they have to do in this game, and I've said it for the first 2 weeks, and they haven't done it. You mentioned it. They've got to run the ball. They have to run the ball, man. They've got to run the ball. They cannot keep thinking that they're going to get away with not doing that and think they're going to win games. So I don't know how they're going to have to open that up. Like I said before, if you have to throw first and then get to the run game, but somehow you've got to have the run game established for multiple reasons. Like you mentioned, play action pass. If you can't run the ball, nobody cares that you're doing play action, because they know that, well, you can't run, so it doesn't matter, right? So they don't have to worry about it. They don't have to respect it. So you have to be able to run the rock. That is so important. It's something Antonio Pierce said way back in training camp. We want to be a smash mouth team. We want to run downhill, and we want to be able to throw the ball around the yard when we want to, because we've already battered and bruised them with the run game. So they've got the running backs to do it. Can they go out there and execute it? That's going to be the question. So that's obviously number one. First and foremost, they've got to be able to run the rock. Number two, they've got to protect the ball. Right, there was a bad interception that Gardner Minshew threw against the Baltimore Ravens, and on his way off the field, Maxx Crosby grabbed him and was like, hey, man, we need you to be you. We need Washington State Gardner Minshew. We need you to snap back into it and be the guy. Like, we got your back, but you need to be the guy. And then he turned around and had a good, second half of the game. But he's got to protect the ball. He really does. I mean, the worst thing that you could do for a team that's struggling offensively is give them a short field. Right? I mean, that's the worst thing that you can do. Yeah. Turn the ball over, give them a short field, and then all of a sudden Andy Dalton's out there on the 40. Oh, all I got to do is go half the length of the field. Boom, good, straight, right? And that can happen. I don't care how good your defense is. You're going to give up some yards. You're going to give up, some big plays here and there. So you've got to be able to protect the ball, stay very, stout and hold on to the ball and really honestly have a few drives. The Raiders are averaging about 60 plays offensively per game. Right, they really want to get that closer to 70. Make those drives a little bit longer. Have a few more plays. Have the time of possession be a little bit more lopsided, where it's more in your favor than as opposed to like 50-50, like the first two games have been. I mean, again, they had 60 plays against Baltimore, 59 plays against the Chargers. So, I mean, I'm not a genius, but you could tell they're around 60 plays a game, right? That's what they're averaging.
Yeah.
So, and then defensively, I just think that they have to continue to do what they do. They just have to trust who they are, right? And creating turnovers is great. I'd love to see them create a couple more turnovers. They finally picked off a pass last week against Lamar. They do look for turnovers, but as long as they're out there playing the stout defense that they've been playing, have done a really good job of stopping the run until late in games when it's all of a sudden, like I said, they've been out there on the field too long. Then teams start to get off a little bit. So I think as long as they're able to do that, you mentioned that the Panthers struggle on third down. In that case, get off the field on third down. Right, get off the field on third down. If they're already struggling to convert third downs, then make sure you handle your business. Pin your ears back. Do what you got to do. Understand that that's a weakness right now and exploit that weakness. So I'm sure that they're studying that on film, but I have a lot of faith in the defense. I really do. The offense is always going to be a question until it's not, but the defense to me is the strength of the team. So as long as they go out there and play the defense the way that they know how, led by Maxx Crosby and Christian Wilkins, I think they'll be fine. But they can't say, oh, this is the Panthers, the 0-2 Panthers coming in. And I laugh when I say that because, man, look, they lost to Baker Mayfield and the Rams 48 hours after Baker Mayfield signed with the team, right?
Oh,
they lost
that Thursday night.
Yeah, they lost to Tyson Bagent and the Bears last season, right? Tyson Bagent's like a D3 quarterback, and he carved them up and made them look silly. They lost to Jeff Saturday when he came out the ESPN booth and was the head coach. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, so.
Oh, no, I didn't realize it was that bad. Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's not a Panthers thing. Like, I want to make it clear to anyone listening and watching that I'm not disrespecting the Panthers. I just know the Raiders' tendencies that they have played down to their opponents, and that has to change. And that has to change on Sunday. They cannot do that and say, oh, this team's already had a quarterback change, and this team struggles on third down, and this team can't do this, that, and the third. They can't play like that. They've got to play like they did against Baltimore. They got to play like they did against Kansas City last year when they went in there on Christmas and beat them. That's who they have to be. They can't be this up and down roller coaster team. So, and believe me, I got more of those stories where they came from.
They lost it just Saturday. Who came
hey, man.
out of it, and they lost, and then the Colts lost every game from then.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
And
yes.
It's funny. You bring up Tyson Bagent. I had some guy because getting some wild DMs this week about what the Panthers are going to do at quarterback moving forward. Someone asked me, "Hey, should the Panthers go after Tyson Bagent? It looks like he could be somebody." It's like, come on, man, come on.
He's not.
Guys, if the Bears thought he was somebody, they would not have got Caleb Williams.
Right.
Which, that's crazy to pass up, anyways. But come on, y'all. Let's not be like this. All right, so I know it's Sin City. You got to wait to go out there and bet on it. FanDuel, that's our partners over there. 5.5 is what they have right now. Raiders 5.5 point favorite. Panthers, of course, 5.5 point underdog. If you look at the last couple of weeks, the line's been pretty similar. So to you Raider fans out there, maybe you want to get that alt line because I don't think you make that much money with that minus 5.5. If you go out there and do maybe minus 19.5, might be able to make some coin. And there's a couple of sports books out there too, Panther fans, that y'all might want to go hit up too. Of course, use FanDuel, but if you want to make money everywhere, I'm just letting you know. Just trying to help you. Just trying to help you fund your trip, just in case things go awry for a third Sunday in a row. So yeah, man, we'll see. I'm a little concerned. I've gotten used to watching bad football, mainly just from like the home team, the Panthers. Right. I have not really had to watch a lot of rock fights, and that would be a departure from what I'm typically used to watching, at least from the opponent. So I'm concerned that might be what we see. Maybe a little bit excited about it, but it's going to be an interesting one on Sunday in Las Vegas for sure.
Yeah, it could be. It could turn into a rock fight. I think that, the Raiders are going to try to do everything that they can to build off of what they did in the fourth quarter against Baltimore. And, I think they found something, obviously, with Devontae and Brock Bowers, and that's really the key, man. Look at those two dudes, and I think that you'll see a lot from them. And, they got a guy in Trey Tucker that can stretch the field, so they haven't really done that yet this year. But I think that you're going to see a little bit better of an offense, but until we see it, I just can't say, I guarantee this is what's going to happen. I know Devontae is going to get fed. I know Brock Bowers is going to get fed. Everything else is kind of on the table, so we'll see what it looks like. But they're trying to find their offense. So if there's a silver lining for Panther fans where, hey, maybe there's a something there that we can exploit, that it could be that right there, that the Raiders are still trying to find their identity offensively.
Both teams have no idea what they have on offense, and maybe they'll find out on Sunday as the Panthers travel to the West Coast to face off against the Las Vegas Raiders on Sunday afternoon. I'm Julian Council, host of Locked On Panthers. He is Q Myers, the host of Locked On Raiders. Again, subscribe or follow our shows over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And check us out again on Friday as we'll be breaking down more of this matchup. Can the Panthers finally get off the mat and get a win? Look like an average NFL team. Don't be an embarrassment. And can the Raiders carry that momentum and stop the trend of losing to teams like a Jeff Saturday coach Colts team or Tyson Bagent or Baker Mayfield, who literally got to LA that afternoon? Can they stop that trend? We'll find out on Sunday afternoon, and we'll talk about it, of course, here on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Raiders. Again, I'm Julian Council. He's Q Myers, and we will talk to y'all on Friday.